Yes, good morning, all of you. So today we are going to discuss about UPSC CSC 2022 GS papers. And the main objective is to see the importance of current affairs, how UPSC has integrated current affairs within its exams. I'll be analyzing all the 4 papers, firstly giving you a broader view of how much marks overall is affected directly by current affairs. For every question, I'll be discussing not the model answer, but why UPSC has asked, what should be your appropriate approach. So let's start off with the session with the breakdown of the marks. So one by one, after that, I'll be taking up the papers, the questions which have been directly asked from the current affairs portion. So if we see GS1, we mostly associate with static portion. We think this is the most static portion of the exam. But this year, what we are seeing is that the portions like geography and society and social issues are becoming more and more dynamic in nature. When I say that, I mean that it is becoming what is being covered in the newspapers. Nothing out of context, but everything from the context of current affairs. Of course, history is something static in nature, but despite that, despite culture and modern history being covered, we still have 100 out of 250 marks specifically asked from the current affairs portion, which is covered in newspapers, articles, magazines, journals, which I will be telling you. So my approach today for every paper and every question will be to guide you that every question, a one-liner suggestion will be there for you. You can write that suggestion, and at the end, you just sum it up. If you can do all these, check that throughout your preparation, I assure you that you will be very well prepared for your GS mains exams. So as we can see, GS1, 100 marks, GS2 and 3, which are more dynamic portions, we've seen that 140 out of 250 and 170 out of 250 respectively have been covered by it. To a significant extent, this year, pretty much surprise is that ethics have certain questions which have been picked up from this year's events. We have Russia-Ukraine war mentioned, and then the ethical dilemmas in them, right? There are questions on constitutional morality, which I'll be discussing later on. But then these are the terms, these are the instances which are continuously being mentioned in newspapers. And that is where this entire, looking at each and every question and analyzing it becomes very important. So we start off with the analysis of GS1, where I've broken down that geography had 65 marks of current affair based questions. So basically, out of 90 marks, which overall was geography portion, 65 have been current affair based questions. Society, 35. See, this is not outright, I'm saying current affair question, but there are certain other areas as well. Means maybe 200, 250 marks additional to this 460 marks, which is questions in which we have to include examples from day to day, right? That I've not included. It is the minimum 460 marks is directly affected by current affairs. So let's start with the analysis of GS1 first. And first question which I want to cover, question 5, sequentially I'll go, which talked about the color-coded weather warnings for cyclone-prone areas given by IMD. We all hear, every year 1 to 2 instances of depression formation, eventually turning into cyclones. Last year, we had cyclones in Bay of Bengal, even Arabian Sea. And one instance where it crossed over into Arabian Sea from Bay of Bengal. You have Yas, you had Ampan, initially Fani. So last 3-4 years, a lot of instances. But we've never gone through sometimes. This is an ANI clipping, which had come in the newspaper as well, which says the warnings, the forecast in which yellow warning, orange warning, red warning, all these are mentioned. Green warning is also there. But if we go through the newspaper, this I've picked up from India Today, but a specific portion in the Hindu also. So what I'll be today covering is what we usually read for our current affairs. Mostly I'll be taking up Indian Express, the Hindu, PIB, and Yojana Kurukshetra, or down to earth. This is my limitation, and I'll tell you how everything is covered in this and what should be your approach. So here a pointer I have written is nothing is asked out of context. Nothing in UPSC is asked out of context. Cyclone year on year, questions are being asked from very basic question 3-4 years ago of how a cyclone is formed in Bay of Bengal to now we are going into a little more detailed part of how IMD classifies it. This is pretty much on expected lines, but then sitting on a conventional material and thinking that this is what UPSC will limit itself to is wrong. We might have to dig a little more, keep on exploring more and more. These are very basic. So we also have the classification with respect to intensity, right? With the intensity of winds, that is also there. So if we can see this was given in the newspaper, online, various portals. Just a simple glimpse and reading about it at least will keep things in your mind. So yellow warning, green, starting green, yellow, orange, red. What does it pertains to? So I've just picked up this from, and what more thing I've noticed is that UPSC, in my research for each and every question, at last 6 months, that is 6 months before the examination when it is being conducted, that is where UPSC is focusing much more. And in that too, the period when after students stop reading newspapers and say, okay, enough is done for reading newspapers. Now let's us concentrate more on our optional and our overall GS preparation. They skip the newspaper. And 50% of the current affairs have been asked from the June, July, August period. They were in news. So this is the first thing you should keep in mind. Nothing is asked out of context when it is being asked in UPSC, especially I've told you 50-60% has a direct relation of the happenings which have been taking place around overall. The second question number 7 of GS1, talked about examine the potential of wind energy in India and explain the reasons for their limited spatial spread. In my current affair class 3 weeks ago, I had taken up this topic. 4 weeks ago, I had taken up this topic. Why this topic? There was this news, wind projection addition to peak by 2024 says report. Plus, you all know that the government of India has recalibrated its targets under NDC, Nationally Determined Contributions, under UNFCCC Paris Agreement, SD. So those 3 pledges have been, there is something called Panchprana also, which Prime Minister talked about in COP26. Recently, in month of August, the cabinet cleared those changes, in which the 50% of overall renewable energy target was set for till 2030. Not defining straightforward earlier, which was 300 gigawatt, was taken off. Why? One of the biggest reasons was wind energy target may not be achievable. And that is what this, wind energy was so much in use. And spatial spread, we had discussed. So when you're reading about wind energy, it is obviously you have to go into where in India the potential lies. What is the existing wind energy, wind energy established plants which are running, and that I had covered in the current affair class of 4 weeks ago. And 2 weeks later, we had a question in. So this is not, again, if we see, remember the triggers. These are trigger points. So India today is looking exceedingly important, giving importance on renewable energy. Solar, 2 times the questions have come in last 2 years. Wind is the second most option for you. And that is where I tell you renewable energy every year, 1 question, be sure about that. And this year, the question was on wind energy. Hence, these are the trigger points. If it is continuously in news, you need to understand that this is where I need to concentrate as well. A question in society we had: explore and evaluate the impact of work from home on family relationships. So a lot had been written ever since lockdown happened. 2 years, you have so many editorials that after reading one or two, you say, okay, we've had enough of it. But the impact of working from home on family relationships have been discussed, not just in editorials, but in open pages as well. Here they are pick up important thing is, if I just shared two articles, one is from Indian Express, the other from Hindu. So, talking about the impact of work from home. So current affairs for UPSC is not just about remembering facts, but a continuous process of evolution of perspective. It is not a one-time thing for you. Sometimes more and more editorials will add dimensions to your understanding. This is a very dynamic topic. It is something which impact is not understood in a day or two. It took a year and a half, 2 years to understand the impact of work from home. And that is where the latest studies has also come in. And that is where, when you read certain articles, especially of late, there will be dedicated studies and reference to that data, which you can quote in such questions will really impact your answer. But then we feel, okay, we've read enough. But don't ignore such topics. And if you see specifically society, I feel this year, social issues of society, they've focused a lot on these things which have been covered so much in newspaper, but yet we've ignored. Hence, that is what I'm saying. It's not just about remembering facts, current affairs, but a continuous process of evolution of perspective. Remember this. We had a question: how is the growth of tier 2 cities related to the rise of a new middle class with an emphasis on the culture of consumption? Firstly, classification of tier 2, tier 3 city. Tier 2 city, right? You can talk about it. Again, I've written editorials are important because with work from home, students going to their own hometowns, companies have decided of late to set up the regional centers or smaller centers. When the service sector will increase, there a continuous salary will end up in the pockets of these employees, and then the consumption pattern which is seen in the bigger cities will trickle down to tier 2 cities. And this has happened in last 2 years when these employees were staying at their hometowns. So a lot of editorial focus was there. That is where sometimes we just feel, okay, this is new, let us read that. But within, in even questions like these are very vague. If we see, we can write a general answer, you'll not get more than 4 or 5 marks out of 10. But if you have data to present how the consumption patterns have changed, which again, I would say the editorials had covered. I'm saying it out of my experience that last 6 months, at least you would find in the Hindu or the Indian Express 5 to 10 articles on it. If you just skip it, it might, but these things might not be covered in your latest society books even, because these are contemporary topics. Even the previous question, these are contemporary topics. They will just create the base of, okay, there are salient features of Indian society, secularism, communalism, then women and association. But these are fine, but these are social issues within the overall salient features of Indian society or contemporary issues. If we see the trend is more on contemporary issues, that is where current affairs become so much important. The editorials become very important. I've just picked up an article again from the, I think so, the Hindu. And in this, if you can read it, you'll understand that how certain cities have shown a jump in their overall consumption, how people have gone back to these cities. And now the IT companies, the service sector is building up offices in these cities. Yeah, question number 15 we discussed. In fact, again, 3 weeks ago in our classroom, we had discussed about rubber industry in India as well as world. Describing the distribution of rubber producing countries indicate the major environmental issues faced by them. So why was it in news? You know, it 2 to 3 days regularly in the newspaper, it had come that Kerala farmers were protesting because of reducing prices of natural rubber. And that is where, when this comes, ultimately you should go into the process of, okay, what is natural rubber, where in India, where in the world? And from here, it is a very interesting question. So it is also an interlinking question. From describing the distribution of rubber producing countries across the world, then indicate their environmental issues, not with respect to this industry, but overall environmental issues. So firstly, it is checking your location-based geography, your economic geography understanding, that where the industry is there across the world, yes. Then, and it was, again, if you just had open your, just kept focus a little more on reading the article on this Kerala industry issue, it was clearly written that it is also because of, one, Thailand and Malaysia, which are one of the biggest producers, they have incentivized their farming industry. One, China also. So there were 4 major countries which we had discussed about. Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, China, and India are the which we had discussed in a class. If you know these countries, you'll know their environmental problems. What are the problems, environmental problems of Southeast Asia? China and India. China biggest emitter, India third biggest emitter, second biggest emitter today. But and then we have Southeast Asia. So from there you can talk about their environmental problems, because now geography, you know, okay, which countries are there. If you're not aware about the countries, you might just guess, and it can work, it cannot work. But when you're clear that these are the rubber producing countries in the world, just show it on the map if you can draw it, and then you start writing for Southeast Asian countries, clubbing Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand together, and then maybe China separately, India separately. Special focus on India. So being proactive is the key, not just sitting on, just reading the article, this is the issue, going into how is rubber produced, where in India, where in the world. And that is where the second part of the question picks up from there. Mention the significance of straits and isthmus in international trade. When we read so many articles related to China in Taiwan Strait, Chinese ships going through Malacca Strait, right? Then Kra Isthmus in Thailand, right? There are many, discussed in, when we are talking about, firstly, Indo-Pacific, South China Sea issues. Third, India's international trade routes. Okay, still fine, but then it would be India's maritime strategy. India setting up, so it was in news that in Great Car Nicobar, India setting up a transshipment hub, eventually a naval hub also, would be because it is close to Malacca Strait. So these are, see, Malacca should be your highlight, 67% of world trade, Malacca Strait. Then Taiwan Strait was so much in news because if there is if there is a war, then semiconductor trade and other reasons, right? So these things, again, sometimes very subtly mentioned in your newspaper articles. That is where I've written location-based geography is game changer today. Even in pre this year, you see, at least 10 to 12 marks were directly influenced by location-based geography. If you were aware, picking up these things like Levant region, ISIL we used to read, Levant question had come, right? Azerbaijan, Armenia war, OIC, Organization of Turkic State question had come. Similarly, this year also, they are making, taking up location-based geography. The previous question was also a location-based geography. From there, they had picked up environmental issue. So location-based geography is a game changer today. Geopolitics and geoeconomics are here to stay. Remember this. So be it GS paper 2, GS1 also, as well as the students who have PSIR as an optional, for them international relations, geoeconomics and geopolitics is here to stay. And these are words regularly being used so much in the regular, in the articles mentioned in the strategies which we are reading. Are tolerance, assimilation, and pluralism the key elements in making of an Indian form of secularism? Justify your answer. So many issues have come up with respect to secularism. A lot of articles, hijab issue, then Gyanvapi Mosque, this and that, a lot of issues. Similarly, a lot of editorials depending on that. So my analysis of this, keep expanding your dimensions in society, topics through current affairs. As I said, contemporary societal challenges is more important today than just going through the static portion of society topic. There are always new debates. Get the grip of it. There are always new debates. Every year there'll be a newer debate coming up in society, social issues. So just get the hold of it. What is being discussed? Why it is being discussed? What are the consequences of it? What are the challenges? Go in those dimensions. We had a question, elucidate the relationship between globalization and new technology in a world of, so this is one of the very complex question. If you read it, there are multiple keywords. Elucidate the relationship between globalization and new technology in a world of scarce resources with special reference to India. Now, at the end, they've written with special reference to India. Globalization and new technology. To understand this question, many students I have discussed with have not attempted in the way it should have been attempted. It is currently that India is facing challenges to get grip of scarce resources, which directly affects its technological industry, especially industry 4.0. You understand that way. Which are those? If you can connect that way. So you start from semiconductors to critical minerals and rare earth metals, medical devices. 60% of medical devices are imported in India. Of course, that is where new tech also is there. People will restrict maximum to semiconductor and critical, but medical devices, cells and modules for solar industry also. Still, we are importing a huge amount of that. Even though we are trying to, we have PLI scheme which has come up in solar manufacturing, but still we are far away from it. These are, so you cannot go into fertilizer here, even though we wish to, because of new technology word mentioned here. So it's a very complex question. You might, so what I've written here is you might read in isolation various topics. Someday semiconductor issue, someday critical minerals and rare earth metals. But UPSC won't ask in isolation. It'll club together. Overall, have you understood issues over time? Get a complete picture. That is very important. So that is where continuous regular reading of newspaper, analyzing regularly becomes very important, right? So it is again looking these things which I've mentioned. There can be one or two more. If you go deeply, you might find 2 or 3 more. But basically these 4, if I focus upon in last 6-7 months, in isolation they've been focused. India's pursuit for critical minerals and rare earth metals, right, is, you can see, semiconductor partnership recently, even your Vedanta setting up a plant of semiconductor plant in Gujarat, why it is important, why India's dependency on TSMC in or Taiwan related companies. Then even at one point I thought of including the APIs, which is the for pharmaceuticals. But again, technology is a very important word here. New technology can be included if I'm talking with respect to biotechnology. So that is where you have to apply yourself within. So this is a 15 marker. You have 10 minutes to write. You have to 2, 3, 4 minutes to think. And while writing also, things will click in. But don't depend on thinking of a particular book you've read. Maybe separate articles, and that is where your skill will come in to club it together. So you might read in isolation, but UPSC won't ask in isolation. Get a complete picture. That is very important. So let's go into Gs2 analysis. Okay. So as per my analysis, again, polity-based questions. So they were questions more or less straightforward, but asked from clear-cut context of current affairs. That is why 45 marks, I'll be covering that. Governance and welfare and social justice and policies, welfare policies, these 45 marks, and international relation, outright winner. So you see, international relation, nothing is actually being asked out of context. It's everything, it's what is being discussed in current affairs. So overall, 140 marks from this. So question 3 of GS2 was, to what extent, in your opinion, has the decentralization of power in India changed the governance landscape at the grassroots? Decentralization. Now, again, it is topic where you can bring Panchayati Raj municipalities, right? Basic understanding is there. To what extent? Now it is talking about as on date. What is the extent? Now you have to get examples from, there are some good examples from Kerala, which is excellent Panchayati Raj setup, to certain states where it is totally dysfunctional. Then there you have to understand about the roles of state finance commissions also, where their functioning and devolution of finances is much better. But there are certain states where it is not at all happening nicely. From where do you get it? Again, when you read in isolation certain articles of how decentralization is working in certain states, you'll have state-specific articles also. Maybe a glimpse of it will get, you'll know it. Okay, this is how things are there working. So democratize and empower. So there are articles continuously coming in on decentralization, Panchayati Raj, municipalities. But examples are right in front of you, we tend to ignore it. If you include examples of states like Kerala and give the data of how they are able to raise their own funds and fund the projects which they've planned for themselves, and can talk about states like Bihar where it is not too functional, where Panchayati Raj, where they cannot even have their financial resources to raise the taxes or money, right? So that is where the examples from current affairs, to what extent, and they're asking till date. That means you have to be up to date, not dependent on a particular book of what I've read in the book, which may be 2-3-year-old data. And that is where the decentralization chapter in a finance commission report was very important, latest. Plus in also your budget and economic survey latest, there would be something on it, data in that as well. That is where current affairs, the question might seem that why I have included there, the entire argument is supported by current affair itself in such questions. So 2 questions I've clubbed together. One was on discuss the role of Vice President of India as the chairman of Rajya Sabha. Critically examine the procedures through which the presidents of India and France are elected. 1 month of July, 1 month of August. Election of president, election of vice president. We've discussed it in the classroom as well. And I've continuously told this is a year of elections. Short, a question either, from vice president or president would come, but they've asked both. Pretty much straightforward. Why again current affairs? Because context is current affairs. You have President Draupadi Murmu being selected and Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar being selected as a vice president, new vice president. This election happens after 5 years. That is why this year becomes important, when you're clearly sure that out of these 2, 1 question will come. But surprisingly, UPSC has asked question both from president and vice president. Even 1 question on governor had come up. So you see, they've asked from nominal heads of states and central government, though vice president is a chairman of Rajya Sabha. But again, so many governors in news. You have regularly issues with respect to Kerala, West Bengal, Punjab, and the states where, Maharashtra. So many court cases with respect to special powers, SR Bomai reference, this and that. So, and that is where also in the question with respect to governor, they had asked, justify with cases, discuss the cases. So these are right in front of you. So there are certain, when we do the analysis, that, okay, this is straightforward, but then they can go into special powers and all. So next year, UPSC never ever asks out of context, as I've told earlier. So president and vice president election year was there. We have question for both. Prediction is important, right? Prediction is important. So This is where these two questions were pretty much expected because of current affairs and have come. Okay, the Gati Shakti Yojana needs meticulous coordination between the government and private sector to achieve the goal of connectivity. Discuss. See, 2022 budget was infrastructure budget. Remember it. Highlight was infrastructure and highlight was PM Gati Shakti. PM Gati Shakti, and what you see in last 6-7 years is, and what one more word was the CAPEX, capital expenditure. When capital expenditure is being spent, it will surely be spent on the infrastructure growth, which will have a great effect on the overall increase in the GDP, right? This was the focus of the budget. Now, after that 6 months, 7 months, a lot of focus has been on various infrastructure projects in road, railways, and airports. So it was clear cut that infrastructure is centered today in economy. And hence a question directly with respect to infrastructure, Gati Shakti Yojana, which has been discussed so many times in newspapers. If you're reading an old version of a book, no mention on PM Gati Shakti, you will find it. A book which is 2021, maybe it is written in December, and finds no mention of PM Gati Shakti. It's only the analysis of, firstly, PM Gati Shakti was announced in the budget, then how government will go about, it kept on coming over the months. So that is where PM Gati Shakti Yojana is not just, again, you have to read multiple times at multiple, maybe more recently to understand what are the nuances of PM Gati Shakti Yojana. But coordination between government and private sector, PPP, again, this is the word for the this year's this paper. In paper 3, paper 2, question both have been asked. Paper 2, public and private partnership, they've talked like this. In paper 3, they've talked about PPP in railways. Last year, they asked PPP in airport, setting up airports. So every year, they are talking about, this is the agenda of the government. We are talking about even so much the privatization of Air India happened. Talk on privatization of public sector banks is being discussed. And so many activities are being conducted in partnership with private sector today. That is where you find two questions in economy in Gs2, means Gs2, of course, it's policy, and Gs3 in economy being asked on the relation between public and private sector. And it will continue to be important because more and more areas will open up in infrastructure and other avenues where government will partner with the private sector. Here, closely tracking. So there is a statement which I mentioned second here again, mentioned in the Hindu. True public-private partnership in infrastructure creation with Gati Shakti. That is what Prime Minister said. Closely tracking what PM says is important for UPSC. I've emphasized that. What he said in the Independence Day speech, I had covered in a separate lecture in my current affair course, and breaking it down. Target 2047 for developed country and Panch Prans and everything, right? So closely tracking it, and of course UPSC will ask, because he is the executive head. He'll lay out the vision of the government, and you, being the future civil servant, will execute those visions. Your ability to know and execute means the first hand to know what is the vision. That is what UPSC will surely ask and is asking. It's not tough to predict, and we predicted means pretty much on the lines, and it came. Gs2 question 7, the Rights of Person with Disabilities Act 2016 remains only a legal document without intense sensitization of government functionaries and citizens regarding disability. Firstly, there's only one act currently which is up to date, which is the act mentioned, but it has certain issues, the issues being continuously being discussed in media, in the editorials. Then there was this draft national policy on disability, which wants to also come up with the newer vision and eventually some amendments to this act also, which had been discussed again in the newspapers, articles, editorials. So even for civil services, there was a petition with respect to that in IPS and other uniform services, the disabled, should be taken up. I mean, this should become part of the reservation, which is 4% reservation, should be extended to them. And Supreme Court had told the government to review it immediately. Hence, there were various ways where disability was being talked about. And then so many smaller articles, if you read with the respect to city page, state page, national page, where access to disabled still is a problem. And that is where they have asked about sensitization of government functionaries and citizens regarding disability is still an issue, despite the act being enacted. That is where you can pick up the points from the draft guidelines. One, to mention the case of even IPS, that sensitization, that it is not just the bureaucracy itself is plagued, but that the access for disabled to some services is also restricted. Then you talk about the cases from particular states, governments, where till now the government offices are not disable friendly. If the offices are not disable friendly, the awareness will be of course limited, will not understand their issues. Like that, you can quote the examples, and this is not, again, I would say, maybe act you can read in a book, but the current challenges you have to have a grip through current affairs. Convergence. When multiple articles focusing on common issue, then take it seriously. Important acts in news are very important, right? This is one of the takeaways for this question. The next question, reforming the government delivery system through the direct benefit transfer scheme is a progressive step, but it has its limitations too. Comment. An article from the Hindu, August 30, 2022 says redefining direct benefit transfers. An editorial talking about the benefits and the issues. Straightforward. One, very latest. Again, certain books will cover it, but then every year technology is changing. Newer policies are coming in. Despite that, there are newer challenges, right? Newer issues. So that is where you cannot rely on 3-4-year-old data. You have to understand the newer challenges every single day. Direct benefit transfer scheme, a lot have happened after JAM, firstly, right? When your Jan Dhan Aadhaar mobile convergence happened, direct benefit transfer saw a lot of fillip, right? But then there was privacy issues. Latest you read articles and you'll find talking about fake accounts coming up. Direct benefit transfer is not just they're limited to many subsidies which central government and state governments extends. You can quote examples where issues have come up because of DBT, where the benefit has actually not transferred to the intended beneficiary. This, along with clear-cut articles, you'll find enough number of, I tell you, this is very much right in front of your eyes. The entire paper is mostly right in front of your eyes. In just a matter of 6 months, 70-80% questions you'll know. If you read it thoroughly, it's right in front of your eyes. And it is not tough to predict even, but it's just that application to collect, coagulate, right, and structure it is an issue. So you might have to pick out points, and that is where when in our classroom, in our current affairs, what we do is we pick up 10-15 important topics of a week and structure it end to end, so that we pick up 10-15 journals reference and just make it very concise and clear. If we see, so here takeaways, instances of misuse and efficiency which are covered in newspapers become essential to consolidate your arguments in such questions. You give an argument, okay, this is the benefit or this is the issue, but what is your argument? How do you justify your argument? Tell that in state of Tamil Nadu, the intended these much fake beneficiaries had been reported. This is because of this issue. Talk about the privacy. The data had been leaked by this is government, like that. That will really, just making it a mediocre answer of fetching you 4.5, 5 marks will take you to 6.5 marks. Those 1.5 additional mark is where current affair data, examples, your analysis, the up-to-date issues will pick up your answer to another level. Remember that. It is the paper is developing over time. Topics are same, syllabus is same. The topics are in itself very dynamic in nature. And when I say talk about dynamic, that is where a single newspaper analysis, few good articles from some good journals can come a long way in just uh, picking up the quality of your answers altogether. Newspaper is a very essential key. Remember that. Current affairs is a very essential key for, I'm just mentioning currently 460 marks, which you can see direct relation. But there are 200 more marks where supportive arguments have to be given through current based topics issues, right? This is in June itself, I discussed in detail about it. India is an age-old friend of Sri Lanka. Discuss India's role in the recent crisis in Sri Lanka in the light of preceding statement. Again, too much in news, pretty much right in your face that this is going to be asked. Firstly, we discussed this is my classroom screenshot which I have covered, that what are the 5 issues currently, and how India on Sri Lanka economic crisis, how it has tried to help Sri Lanka, and under what. So neighborhood first and cultural ties under that. We had discussed in the classroom and had an extensive discussion on that. So extended coverage in news, and when India is a stakeholder, important stakeholder, make sure it's a short question. Russia, Ukraine, we expected. It didn't come. Not in 3, not in paper 2, not in paper 3, but it came in paper 4. In ethics, I'll talk about that. It had come. So where India is an important stakeholder, and when there is an extended coverage, you understand that there is a possibility, high possibility of a question. And that is what, it's a very easy answer to it. But then June or July, these things happened. How India extended help. And it's also evolving. Like initially, it sent oil, rice, okay? Then they extended line of credit. Then they extended aid. Then they extended help in international fora to get IMF on the board. So it is a developing story. It's not one-time article, okay, this is the help, I'm done. You have to have understanding of what ways India is trying to help Sri Lanka over the period of time, right? This is where your grip, when you see, okay, Sri Lanka, let's leave it. But whenever India is mentioned of India's role in Sri Lanka, try to just update yourself. What is the new, thing which has come up, or new area where I should concentrate? In Russia, Ukraine, I have told many times that they have been repeated, Ukraine taking up this area, Russia taking up this area. This can be left for a while if you understand the basic core of issue. But when India is a stakeholder and there has been regular discussion and India is being mentioned again and again, try to read those areas. Okay. So this was there. BIMSTEC and SARC. And a very interesting analogy I've just come out with. PM Modi 2014 swearing in, SARC leaders were invited. PM Modi 2019 swearing, BIMSTEC leaders were invited. It shows the shift, 1. 2, it shows, see, SARC, the question reflects India's foreign policy strategic shift as SARC became defunct. SARC became dysfunctional because of India didn't want to have Pakistan on same board, on same table. Hence, it became, but then India showed it's that if we can't, push in the direction of SARC, let's push in the direction of BIMSTEC. An article this year, again, the Hindu and Indian Express, 3 articles. I mean, what is the BIMSTEC grouping and how it is significant? Can India reimagine South Asia? Every day, what is BIMSTEC? The Bay of Bengal grouping of nations. Whenever the discussions have come up in these articles, you continuously find parallel relation with SARC, and there have been arguments that SARC has to be revived. There have been arguments where BIMSTEC, also is strategically paying India certain things, a shift to, and it is isolating Pakistan everywhere. So there is pro and both side of arguments are there. So it is not just a one-time thing. Again, You see it's a strategic shift which has happened in last 8 years. BIMSTEC and SARC is a perennial thing which has been right there in news in regular last 8 years in front of you. But the question has come in a very beautiful way. Do you think BIMSTEC is a parallel organization? This is what these articles were discussing. Now it is again up to you. Which kind of arguments you favor? Do you think? Yes, I think. I don't think. Okay. What are the similarities and dissimilarities between here the countries you can talk about? Their emphasis you can talk about. And India's role in that you can talk about. How are Indian foreign policy objectives realized by forming this new organization? Foreign policy objectives, neighborhood first, right? Sagar, security growth for all in the region. Look, Act East, most important, BIMSTEC. That is where we're shifting. Act East. These are policy objectives. Then other India's maritime strategy also policy for means then see foreign policy cannot be just restricted to an outline policy as such, but sometimes economic integration also it comes under foreign policy. You talk about economic integration. Then there is Mekong Delta Cooperation, Mekong Ganga Cooperation, sorry, which is, you can say, because of BIMSTEC, it is getting a further push, but because of Myanmar now under coup, it has gone on a backbench like that. So it's a very interesting question, very easy question, but if you follow the regular progress in terms of articles, and if you clearly see that this is the objective, how the overall idea is being formed. And I think so, if you read the book S. Jayashankar's The India Way, there also it shows that why BIMSTEC is not in conflict with SARC. He's talked about it. The next question talks, we will discuss Gs2. Besides the welfare schemes, India needs deft management of inflation and unemployment to serve the poor and the underprivileged sections of the society. Discuss. So tell me, last 4, 5, 6 months, especially firstly after pandemic, unemployment has been the burning issue. 1. 2, inflation in the last 6 months, when CPI inflation has been nearly over above 7 in all these 4, 5 months, except one time when it was 6.7 nearly. And global inflation also high. So these are right in front of you every single day. Every single day inflation, CPI, WPI, right? MPC discussing this and that. They're telling beside welfare schemes, deft management is required for them so that underprivileged sections of society, it is affecting them most. Here, I've made 2 biggest challenges plaguing Indian economic and inflation and unemployment. These 2 have biggest impact on whom? Underprivileged sections, right? This is right in front of you. Data and reference to reports in such questions go a long way. Talk about that in inflation, talk about food inflation, which is the consumption. Consumption is almost same for all sections of society. Basically food consumption, right? It is the highest among the overall CPI basket. 1. So impact is more. Give the data if you can. Refer to CMIE or other reports which is regularly coming on how it is impacting. Talk about, economic survey, though is not touched on inflation, but it is touched on unemployment data. How it has impacted, how the pandemic actually impacted overall unemployment sector. Talk about from formal sector to informal sector, there has been a lot of shift. Initially, so you'll find a lot of stuff which you would have collected in form of data in economy last 1.5 years when you will be writing next year. And that you can pick and choose and write very nicely. And the impact of unemployment, because in underprivileged sections today, when farming sector output is reducing and it's not reaching that level, people are looking towards opportunities, employment opportunities in urban areas and service sector or manufacturing sector. If still they do not get that, then the poor will have a very difficult time in terms of accessing the whatever basic minimum requirements he or she needs to have. Also can talk about, that is why PMGKAY has been continuously extended so that these, at least in the food aspect, the poorest of the poor does not have to be affected. Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, like that. So it again, data is very important in such questions. if you want to write, you can write, but answer will be pretty much vague if you just write your arguments without supporting through data. Mention some months like average CPI or CPI of a particular month, at least the latest one in your answer. That the August data would you can write in such answer that in August the inflation was 7.04. It has been continuous fifth month or fourth month, which has been above 6%, which is a comfortable level for the RBI. So even the global inflation is increasing. Talk about even fertilizer inflation, because in India today, rural population is highly affected by it. And that is where, the poor and underprivileged section, which is a small landholder, will be affected, right? If he or she does not get access to good quality fertilizer, that means the production will get low yield, ultimately low profits. So this is where you can keep connecting also, but you have to stay in these two areas of unemployment and inflation. But data, support with the data, very important. Data comes regularly. CPI data would come in economy page of every single month, that will be declared. WPI will be declared. So you have data with respect to employment, where PLFS data would come in, right? Labor force survey, periodical labor force survey, right? That also comes, the data pointed out to that. So question 19 of paper 2, I2U2. Again, I have mentioned from the article which we had covered in our class, I2U2, and here I've given significance also. So how will I2U2 grouping transform India's position in global politics? And I had discussed in the class, and empowers partners and encourages them. So US regards India as a big consumer market as well as the massive producer of high tech when it comes to Israel's relationship with UAE, United States. So in a way, new organization. So if you see last 4-5 years trend, I have mentioned there, new international groupings involving or affecting India, be it Quad, AUKUS, SCO, BRICS, I2U2. This is the trend. You might see a question on IPEF also next year. You never know, because of so much again in news just recently, IPEF. There was critical mineral partnership recently, which India also wants to be part of. Like that. See, just keep it, because there are many new kinds of organizations coming up. And this is a very unique, and why? Because it's not regional. It is 4 partners coming together, which we've discussed in detail the importance, how it can give India a leverage in international diplomacy. It'll help India to penetrate Middle East very nicely, to counterbalance the issues between Israel and other Middle Eastern countries and become a mediator. To also it brings USA into the picture, where USA wants to project India as a regional power, so that it wants to be in the wants to push India forward to take charge of the Indo-Pacific region much more actively through such organizations, right? So these are the ways, means we've discussed in detail in class. When I2U2, just don't look, okay, what is I2U2, but significance, how it can transform India's position in global politics. You can quote here that recently the Minister of External Affairs, S. Jaishankar, had mentioned that he would envy India's foreign minister of 2047, because India is looking forward to consolidate its position in upcoming years. Hence, such groupings like I2U2 will significantly give a fillip to India. Like that, you can just introduce your answer like that. But everything is right in newspaper or in your current affairs. No mention of I2U2 finds 4 months ago, 5 months ago, right? So just see the importance, especially international relation. I've told 100%. Don't need to go through the books of international relations if you're not a student of international relation for your mains. You just need to keep a track of what's happening currently, and also a little search of the history of relationships on your own. But don't go into the books of detail. Let me go to the entire history of NAM. Let me go to the entire history of Panchsheel, India-China from 45 till now, right? It is the dynamism right now. It is the current part, of course. Strategic, geopolitics, geoeconomics, I'm again focusing. These are the important areas where UPSC is focusing on. Question 20 of paper 2. Clean energy is the order of the day. Describe briefly India's changing policy towards climate change in various international fora in the context of geopolitics. Again, a very interesting question. Many important keywords here I would like to. Clean energy is the order there is one quote. Let's keep it aside. India's changing policy, India's changing policy towards climate change in various international fora. So I have emphasized India's changing policy. This means evolving process. Hence, it needs to be tracked over the period. So when I say various international fora like COP26, UNFC meetings, right? Then G20, G7, in various international SCO also you can talk about, where these international where India is present. Then there is one word, changing. Again, changing, I have updated NDCs. This is a changing stance. Green hydrogen policy, this is changing, a newer policy, or maybe India's further push to renewable energy from 40 means now 50% of total renewable energy target to 20. That is NDC, under NDC only. Now geopolitics. International fora in the context of geopolitics. Global South, we've heard this word recently, 2 days ago, 1 day ago, in a MEA, Minister of External Affairs briefing with Tony Blinken, who's the Secretary of State of US, just 2 days ago, where he's talked about India to be the champion of Global South. LDCs, least developed countries. In Global South, we are also talking about G77, group of 77. You can talk about that. In the context of India wants to present that we are going to support you. Now there is something called, we also talked about through adaptation, mitigation, and financing. India talks about that, and also CBDR. CBDR is common but differentiated responsibilities. That we are not the historical emitters, hence we should not be have all the responsibility of today taking up the initiative. It should be, we are ready to take, but it should be differentiated between developing and developed countries, like that. And how India is championing the cause of all the Global South, the group of G77. In geopolitics, India wants to leverage this policy, its stance towards bringing in these countries under its fold, like that. So this is a very complex question. So you have to break down such questions and then bring it together, like that. So again, this cannot be picked up directly from a book and written down, but it has to be understood from multiple dimensions. Multilateralism also you can bring in here. India's various international fora and the UNSC, you can bring in. India's been talking about that when climate discussions are happening, let's say next year, India would cease to be the member of UNSC when it completes 2-year membership period. Then again, India will not be vocal enough to take up issues with respect to climate change through UNSC. And that is where India is also talking about permanent membership through G4 also, like that. You can bring in, dimensions. See, there is nothing right and wrong. It is how you justify, is how you present, and how you catch the attention of the examiner that look at this, that why it is a valid argument, right? So, but that has to be done when you very thoroughly read some good editorials, understood the good grasp on basics, the current issues overall, and then various dimensions like this global southward, mentioning it, highlighting it, can immediately bring examiner would say, okay, very good mention. So 1 marks simultaneously would get increased. So I'll go into Gs3 analysis now after Gs1 and Gs2, and this is where the bulk of current affairs relevance is clearly seen. 170 marks out of 250 marks. And here economy 50 marks, 35 marks of environment, 35 of science and tech, internal security 40 marks, and disaster management 10 marks. So one by one, I'll discuss quickly here. So question was, why is PPP, again, this is what I was talking about earlier, required in infrastructural projects? Examine the role of PPP model in the redevelopment of railway stations in India. So again, if you've read, this is November last year, Habibganj station in Bhopal, renamed Rani Kamlapati station was the first station in India developed under PPP, right? Now, if you read 3 days ago, though it is after your exam, under PPP, 3 more stations are going to be, the cabinet has given clearance. Of course, it's not directly PPP, but they are exploring that model as well. Delhi, Mumbai, which is CSMT, as well as Ahmedabad stations. So again, PPP, last year question had been asked in airport sector, today railway. In future, you might have in ports also, right? It's I feel one question on public-private partnership every year, expected. And this sense was a news this year. This is why UPSC is trying to, and let's just see, they've talked about examine the role of PPP model until unless you won't quote a railway station here, your answer is incomplete. They'll not give you good marks. If you just give even a single example of this is the redevelopment project which happened in the PPP, and it will go a long way, right? And it will give you at least 1.5 mark more, just quoting one example. Why is public-private required in infrastructure projects? So first part is 5-mark part, which is why PPP is required in infrastructure projects. So you can talk about national infrastructure pipeline event, right? That government duty is not to, of course it has to fill up, but it cannot bear the burden of growth alone or infrastructure. Today, when private sector is increasing at good pace, rapid pace, it should also parallelly bear the burden, because ultimately it will benefit them. The growth of the private sector itself, the industry itself, for their forward linkages, backward linkages. So I'll just quote an example. I'll give an example. I've been to a place, Chandikhol and Kalinganagar in Odisha. So entire 40-kilometer stretch has been built by Tata actually, road. Why it's spent? Because it actually benefit Tata Steel industry, which is situated there, to reach the market and the railway station where they had to take their product. Government couldn't, because of paucity of funds, couldn't participate. So in the end, it is about that private sector eventually will reap dividends from it, benefit from, and also the model is such that they can extract the profits from the like user charges, like in airports, for example. If there is an airport run by Adani, for example, currently Mumbai airport has been taken over by him. There are 6 airports under that. So in every ticket of yours, there is some charge, user development fee, something like that, in an airline fee. It is around 200-250 rupee. A portion of it goes to them. This is the profit, right? This is their, if they've invested, they have to get returns also. So government also ensures that they get return on them. And government does not have to think about the funds, which they have to importantly utilize in subsidizing and other welfare activities. That is where you can depend. So these things are in use. Understanding the trend is very important every year. This year was infrastructure push. We have 2 questions directly in that. State food ministers so question was, what are the major challenges of PDS in India? How can it be made effective and transparent? So in July, this month, July 5, a meeting happened between state food ministers to discuss PDS, and in which the issues with respect to PDS and how we need to improve was discussed. It was covered in the newspaper. So this is one of the things, the question, if you can, how it can be made effective and transparent. One of so if you read the article, I've mentioned few topics. The key highlights of the conference would include the discussion on food fortification, diversification of food basket, crop diversification, integrated Anna Vitran portal. Like this is what you actually can mention it to make it more effective. Like, right, it was right. Best practices being followed in some of the states will also be shared. So you can have best practices in various states, picking up and bringing it, replicating in other states. The conference will serve as a platform to reflect upon the challenges and opportunities in the true spirit of cooperative federalism. So if you read what was the, after 2-3 days, what was the outcome, you'll get to know that this is the, how we can make it effective, transparent, what are the challenges, and up to date with latest. So it won't be like the age-old issues which you mentioned, like lack of POS machines or Aadhaar linkage problem. Like this is conventional. If you write this, you'll still get 4 marks out of 10. But to get 6 marks, you have to add certain things like that. Okay. So 2-year-old book may cover it, but only current affairs will take up new challenges and solutions to problems. Okay. We have the next question. The increase in life expectancy in the country has led to newer health challenges in the community. What are those challenges and what steps need to be taken to meet them? So again, we had open. So a very important thing here, open pages are not just for entertainment. Please don't ignore them. Sunday pages, there are some open pages. There are Sunday Hindus special edition or Indian Express Saturday and Sunday. Please go through them. Some very good articles come in there. And I've seen in both pre and mains question have been asked from it. Like Gucci mushrooms, question had come, it was covered in open page just 2-3 months before the pre-exam. In fact, the question on in 2021 pre also on Gandhiji writing translating a particular poem into, in Yeravada jail was actually one of the mention in open pages, but not in your modern history book. So open pages can be very important. So these are open page, long life, a boon or a bane. In India, this was covered, that what are the issues and then the need of the Asha for elderly. These are articles which are being discussed, but mostly on open pages and may not find space in editorial regularly. Yes, in editorial also once or twice, but sometimes when open page, someone discusses their own problems also, like very nicely in a very eloquent way. And UPSC I've seen is going into those dimensions as well. So open pages are just not for entertainment. So there are certain very good book reviews also. Very good. Also read them when they are, you think it is part of syllabus. Recently, a book on Vishwa Bharati University, it's changing emphasis and how its transformation from Shantiniketan to it, and what was the original idea of Rabindranath Tagore in that. So just getting through it, you'll know that role of Rabindranath Tagore in setting up it. What was the first institute he established? There are certain small points which might be asked in UPSC in pre. Okay. So like this, you can go through it, but don't go through a movie review. Okay. What I'm telling is with respect to your exam syllabus. Discuss in detail the photochemical smog, emphasizing its formation, effects, and mitigation. Explain the 1999 Gothenburg Protocol. Here, the problem is not the first part. That is in your standard book in environment. You'll read about how photochemical smog is formed, effects, and its mitigation. Moreover, it is also discussed so much whenever every year smog comes in Delhi, we'll have newspapers filled with it. But problem is the 1999 Gothenburg Protocol, which is not too much mentioned in your news, not much. This is an actually down-to-earth article. And this article was published 11 November 2021. Rising ammonia levels in West Africa linked to biomass burn. In this, I mentioned countries countries in Europe have committed to modest reductions of ammonia emissions in the framework of the Gothenburg Protocol. I personally feel environment for both pre and mains is important because it is also becoming part of your GS paper 1 and even in policy part of paper 2. So this Down to Earth magazine, at least 2 to 3 articles of every edition, I find it very important, very interesting. And this, I, in fact, of late have been picking up for my classroom material also from Down to Earth and find it, they have a very good research team. In India today, in environment, it is the best journal to follow, and maybe in some areas of science also. But that is why Down to Earth has become an important source. Be selective. I have specifically be selective. Similarly, Yojana Kurukshetra, people just take all the magazines, keep it in cupboard, and then just keep looking at them and never open. You can just find 10 to 15 minutes every day, identify an article to read. 3 articles from all these 3 magazines a month can go a long way in your paper. I tell you, it can be very effective. But first hand read. Don't pick up the summary. Let us read the summary of Yojana and summary of Kuru. Summary is a second hand view. You might not like it the way, or like this month's Yojana, September 2022. The lead article was on cross-border terrorism in Kashmir. Brilliant article which talked about the unique dimensions of terrorism in Kashmir, how it is different in northern Kashmir and how it is different in southern Kashmir. Today in newspaper, if you open, it is written that how uh, cross-border terrorism means the local terrorists are increasing in southern Kashmir, and cross-border terrorism is much more in northern part of it. And this is what the data in that article the author has provided. And in that, the unique dimensions of like various districts and the latest organizations active, how this, so what I'm telling is that articles sometimes are very important in terms of interpreting, but we need to look at, uh, overall, just they catch your own, you have to connect it with what you've read. Don't pick someone's summary and start imposing it in yourself. That is where Current Affairs monthly magazine also can reap dividends to a limit, but it's not a one source for you. This is newspaper has to be the most important source for you. Remember that. But maintaining notes is very challenging. What you could do is just try to, develop your opinion and perspective over a period. Things will remain with you because you'll come across it again and again, right? UPSC is going unconventional, so should you be, right? Explained. So explain the mechanism and occurrence of cloudburst in the context of Indian subcontinent. Discuss two recent examples. So cloudburst, 2-3 months regularly, it was in news. What happened in firstly Amarnath, but then later on it was said that it was not a cloudburst because it didn't meet the parameter. Then you regularly hear it in Uttarakhand, and especially Chamoli district. You hear it in what happened McLeodganj in Dharamshala also, flash flood through cloudburst. It was expected to happen. And then we had so many good in Indian Express and the the Hindu. You had articles on cloudburst. What is it? Then examples also written in it. This is straightforward, directly from current affairs. Disasters also. What I've seen, disasters in news, that should be our focus. So if you see that this was the one of the most important disasters being talked about just before the exam. 6 months, that is why I say 6-month period I find is more important than overall year or year and a half, especially for mains perspective, because you have latest data, latest updates, latest developments, and newer changes in geopolitics, geoeconomics, and strategy, and overall international outlook. Means, so that is where people who are leaving after pre, I tell you, 80% do that. They say, okay, we have written pre, we are expected to clear. What I'll do is, I'll stop the newspaper from today. Why to waste 1 hour? That is the problem. Never ever 365 days, come what may, that should be your #1 priority of the day. Okay. Even if you've gone out somewhere, come back late, entire day routine is gone. But only thing if you have to do, it should be newspaper. That is the most important thing. What are the maritime security challenges in India? Discuss the organizational, technical, and procedural initiatives taken to improve the maritime security. So again, if you go into detail, no one article caters to it in newspaper, maritime strategy. There are some good writers who ex-Navy or ex-Air, means ex-Navy also, they write in newspapers. But overall maritime strategy, here 3 words are used as organizational, technical, and procedural. You have to separately go into that. Organizational, you can talk about Navy and Coast Guard, and then their further organizational details. Technical, of India's technical expertise in terms of our own kinds of warships, kinds of submarines and types, and how we are spread out. And procedural, with respect to the organizations like Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, or there are more organizations which come together like that. But then I found that there are some journals. So this is one think tank. I found a very good article, which is almost what UPSC asked from. So May 18, 2022, India's maritime security 5 concerns. So ITSA is a think tank, Manohar Parrikar Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, had written a very good. So once in a while, once in a month, maybe going through international internal security, go through some government think tanks. Not just government, but there are some good think tanks in international relations like ORF, like ORF is there, Gateway House. But see, you cannot go through everything. That is where the role of current affairs specialized classes comes in also, where people will come in and have done, taken up things from other areas and presented into you in a combined manner. But I personally feel that government think tank, UPSC is pushing you, take up the challenge. So this is where UPSC does not have a defined area. This is where we'll remain in. But everything is asked from what is important for India. And maritime strategy is something which is so much in news. When you just Google maritime strategy, Google it all, you'll find this on second, third number. Why don't you go like that? Pick up keyword. So picking up keyword is very important, right? Picking up keyword, searching for it. So current affairs is not just being, see, newspaper is where which will form a very firm base in your current affairs. But then developing over it, building over it, being more proactive means going through some multiple areas, scanning through. And I tell you, this way I found that it is very smart way of learning. Rather than picking up 10 journals, like I still remember a few years ago, people used to get World Focus, this 10 magazines, Science Reporter, and then scan one by one, start reading it. Not a smart way of approaching. World Focus, if you see, if we've ever seen through, focuses upon one topic, an entire magazine of every university, almost many university professors write on it. Very good articles, but it's a repetitive thing. You have to be smart enough. If you find a very good article, maybe you can save it. There are today apps where you can take a screenshot and just pin it with a particular topic. Just remember, knowing that, okay, if I have to go into maritime strategy, might have to go through this article again, like that. Economic growth in the recent past has been led by an increase in labor productivity. Explain this statement. Suggests the growth pattern that will lead to creation of more jobs without compromising labor productivity. So some terminology clearly specify the current relevance of question like recent past. So here the word is mentioned, economic growth in the recent past. Data to focus here, economic survey, monthly, quarterly, annual data. So basically, again, a data-driven question, labor productivity, and a chapter on this you will usually find in your economic survey. Economic survey is a very important document, must go through every year, but entire document is very tough to go through, around 600 pages, both the volumes, 700 or even more. But a good summary can be good on this. I'll be I try to have open session on economic survey of my own as well. But then what you can do in such areas? As I said, maintain a separate copy, data book, divide into separate sections where you can, with respect to employment, with respect to sub parts, you divide it. Important data which you find, it shouldn't be like every single report you come across, you mention it there. Don't do that. 2 to 3 important reports maximum. It should be so easy to remember that this is just a week before your mains. You should go through it 2-3 times, and I tell you, it will add 50 marks to overall score which you would be getting. If you can make it in society, women, child, separate education, health, data, latest. Because in monthly magazines or in newspapers, you cannot go back now and find the data now. If you have a first hand, just, I tell you, it's just 20 pages or 30 pages. But it will help you in 1, 2, 3, 4 essay also. So it will help you in 1 to 50 marks. So this is where it is I just wanted to discuss this thing here. The maintaining data is very important. Do you think India will meet 50% of its energy needs? Again, you see, it is again picked up from NDC, India's updated NDC. 50% of its energy needs from renewable energy by 2030. Justify your answer. So do you think you can say no, yes, right? Just how will the shift of subsidies from fossil fuels to renewables help achieve the above object? So again, here I've talked about two. One, again, these both articles. One is the top one from down to earth, and the second one is the ORF. Talking about exact two things, first and second part. India's new climate targets, bold, ambitious, and a challenge for the world. That will it be able to or will it not be? What it has to do to achieve it, what it has to immediately change. So you can create an opinion for that. Yes, it can do. No, it can't do because of these challenges. Until unless which are not overcome, it won't be able to. Second, petroleum subsidies in India gone with the wind. So how these subsidies have to be curtailed and diverted towards rather the subsidy. So this is where you can talk about latest PLI in solar energy, where where the government has assured 90,000 crore support to develop solar manufacturing in India, solar cells and modules. So, these diversion of subsidies from petroleum is required eventually, because more with the coming up of, let's say, EVs and all, ultimately the petrol and diesel consumption will reduce. So the transition plan has to be, be discussed like that. So these two articles brilliantly discussed that. What are the, firstly, need to know what are petroleum subsidies, where it is being used, who's the consumer of that subsidy. Only then you will be able to understand that why, if it is shifted to renewable, who will be the ultimate beneficiary of it, right? So interesting question, opinion based question, but opinion again is based not on one particular article you've read from a monthly magazine. Then everyone will have a same opinion and a same argument, and it will not be something very close to you. But if you've read over the period, the argument will be like as if you're debating on it. It should be like that. See the answer when you write it, and when the examiner feels that you're debating on it, that you are very passionate writing about it, look at these points, they will surely, and this is my experience, this is an experience which I've worked with certain students also, have reflected that it gives you much more than what you even think. Working with certain kids, I've seen that among the highest marks in GS, if we integrate certain best practices which we are talking about. So what is integrated farming system? How it is helpful to small and marginal farmers? Very straightforward. But then why in news? I've not discussed here, but then there were three types of farming which are consistently being discussed in news. Natural farming. Prime Minister talked about regularly the importance of natural farming. Surat model also was one of the discussed. Second, organic. In India, organic, Philip, is there. Second, Sri Lanka, when it made its country organic, and because of which its production drastically reduced, right? And integrated. So that, and a committee was formed by Prime Minister, in which, of course, including experts and which have to look into certain dimensions into natural farming, diversification of crops, this and that. But that is where, that means the types of farming is trending today. So they've not asked something like natural farming or organic farming, which has been asked in past. They've gone into integrated farming. 1,000 times, I think so, I've told this, that this is one of the most important topic in science this year. James Webb Space Telescope, what are its unique features which make it superior to its predecessors? So you have to talk about Hubble telescope and compare it with it, which we did in our class as well. What are the key goals of the mission, which we also discussed, and what potential benefits does it hold for the human race? I still feel that this James Webb Space Telescope, more question can come on it with respect to its instrumentation, particularly in with respect to its newer research, like recently a Jupiter pic had come up. Before that, 6 pics it had released, and more pics will come up, more research, more things it will explore because of its being super powerful in nature. So it was the most important topic, not just in space technology in a year, but also most important event in field of science. Hence, highly expected and an easy question, to be honest. Differences with Hubble have been discussed many times in newspaper, in various if you just Google James Webb Space Telescope, you'll have BBC 10-minute video. You'll have CNN documentary on it. You have multiple documentaries talking about how it is more effective. And then with respect to recent images, being discussed, how it is so effective. So this was a pretty much expected question, and it came in, very upfront way, easier way, and I feel that still it has scope to be asked in future. What is the basic principle behind vaccine development? How do vaccines work? What approaches were adopted by Indian vaccine manufacturers? Again, vaccine development was not a one-time process. It was a developing process. Now, India initially had two manufacturers, right? Which were your Serum Institute, SII, and Bharat Biotech, sorry, I just forgot. Bharat Biotech. So Covishield and Covaxin respectively, which they did. But then eventually you should not limit yourself to here. You have to talk about further more types of vaccines like Corbevax and like DNA vaccine and type of vaccine, how we from vector borne to how we shifted towards the DNA vaccine. This process has to be explained. Means not process, at least up to date you should be there. So it is not the first, if you're just explained about the initial process, that is just a half of it. But latest vaccines also, nasal vaccine, right? All types you have to explain. How do vaccines work? This is basic. Yes, how do they work? But then their DNA works in a different type. RNA, mRNA works in a different type. Recombinant and vector borne, they're different type, right? Like that. But then ultimate they want is how it actually triggers the over immunity of your system. What approaches were adopted by Indian vaccine? So this is where you have to tell about the approaches. So vaccine development was not a one-time process, but a continuous one. Understanding of vaccines is also evolving process, and Indian manufacturers adopted a step-by-step approach, and also more vaccines came up in due course. So this is important. Cybersecurity. Every time I tell one question, 100% confirm cybersecurity will come every year, mandatory, and it will come. Always expect one question from cybersecurity. Every year, new challenges in this field. Hence, continuous updation is a must. Every year, new challenges. Because one year you'll hear about Pegasus. Other year you'll hear about attack on Indian, some establishments like Kudankulam attack was there. There was suspected attack on Maharashtra's electricity grid, like that. So there have been a lot of articles. You'll find what are the ways it further needs to improve India's cybersecurity. Then there is so much debate going on personal data protection, non-personal data, right? Then, global giants of that intermediary rules and all. Everything you have to keep a track of. These are evolving times because India still do not have a personal data protection law. And the recent draft has been, taken off the table, and the new draft will come up soon. So keeping track of that, plus other cybersecurity challenges, you have to be continuously updated. Various Trojan viruses, ransomwares and all, everything up to date. Only the latest information will fetch you much more than outdated one, okay? And left-wing extremism article, we discussed it in classroom in detail. So recently also, if you see, left-wing extremism was not a very prominent in news, but of late, last 2-3 months, when CRPF has recently told Bihar is free from Naxalism, and even Jharkhand is on the verge of finishing it. And then it is now restricted to now limited number of districts. And even Amit Shah has told that there is sharp decline. But then still, a question talks about social, economic, and development issue manifesting as a violent internal. So you have to take it in various dimensions now. This is social, into social, economic, and developmental. Why Naxalism is a result of lack of these, and how it can be overcome if we pay attention to these areas. In this context, discuss the emerging issues. Now here, important word is emerging issues. Can you tell me what can be emerging issues? And there is another word is suggest a multi-layered strategy. Multi-layered strategy. Two very important words. Emerging issues. Of course, negotiations is there, right? Emerging issues I want. So emerging issues can be that now there was a dedicated cadre being, since there has, if you know, there is a Politburo, CPC. Their members either have died or have almost become inactive. Hence, now the attacks will not be structured, but can be more lone wolf, which is an emerging trend. If you're, see this, I'm talking about because of my deeper, means my understanding on ground also. But what I'm telling is they want emerging issues. And also emerging issues can be that with deeper penetration in the areas of jungles where never the government has reached, there will be greater developmental challenges, greater threats, right? There might be a lot of hostility towards the armed forces or the administration. So these are emerging, further emerging, because if you you have to name certain areas also, like Burha Pahad, which was that word, which is the area first time ever the armed forces have reached there in Jharkhand, Burha Pahad. I still remember looking from far off area and we were scared off to some other places because it was such haunt. But now it control has been established. See, that is where if you see there is a dynamism in, it's not straightforward question in internal security. You have to pick up the challenges, and now these challenges are also different from every state. If you really see, the core challenges lie in the Dandakaranya region of Chhattisgarh, a little of Odisha, northern Telangana. But challenges are very vastly different in Jharkhand and North Odisha. So this you will get to know maybe not just from reading a book, but maybe going into certain core articles and being a little more proactive. So this was all in GS 1, 2, 3. GS 4, I'll not do analysis, but I'll just read the question and we can discuss on that. What do you understand by term good governance? How far recent initiatives, again, recent initiatives in terms of e-governance steps taken by the state have helped the beneficiaries? Discuss with suitable examples. So when you say recent examples, a lot of recent examples, apps, initiatives, training programs like this and that, right? This way. So you can write a lot here, but then it has to be recent initiatives. It cannot be, again, when you start from NEG, National E-Governance Division was set up like this. Don't say that, because that is already there. Recent initiatives. Second, online methodology is being used for day-to-day meetings, institutional approvals in the administration for teaching and learning in education sector, to the extent telemedicine in the health sector is getting popular with the approvals of the competent authority. No doubt it has advantages and disadvantages for both the beneficiaries and the system at large. Describe and discuss the ethical issues involved in using online method, particularly to vulnerable section. Again, these threats, online meetings, challenges of online meetings, right? Issues being faced. So ethical issues, but then you have to quote some recent examples also. Russia and Ukraine war has been going on for last 7 months. Different countries have taken independent stands and actions keeping in view their own national interests. We are all aware that war has its own impact on the different aspects of society, including human tragedy. What are those ethical issues that are crucial to be considered while launching the war and its continuation so far? Illustrate with justification the ethical issues involved in given state of affair. And I'm very sure in this, 90% students would have mentioned just a day or two earlier when Prime Minister had said with a meeting with President Putin that it is not an era of war. And that is where you can also pick up and further explain on that. Because 16th is when Prime Minister said this, 18th is the date of this exam. So you can pick up from there, and of course it will become very important. And then you can go, but then they've specifically talked about war. Here you can think about the arguments from Western perspective, media perspective, India stand, understand China stand also, right? we have to understand both dimensions, because let us look at clearly. India is saying that we have to, at the end, our immediate objective is to cater to our people. They have not said that war is correct. So that was a big statement. This is not an era of war. And outrightly saying it in the face of the president of the country who's gone into war is a big thing. But though they've not participated in some of the resolutions, but still India is not in the favor of war. So you have to talk about that, it be taking care of Indian interest, parallelly not being outright supportive of war. These two areas that India has traveled this thin line or tread this thin line very nicely. Of late, you can justify that. So ethical issues involved, ethical issues that one, that India could be seen as a favor of war. Second, no criticism, can lead to eventual isolation. Also, ethical issues means a lot of dimensions here, which we've discussed through Russia-Ukraine war. But just see that now UPSC through current affairs is going into ethics also. It was there, but it was asking you to give examples. Now it is saying this is what happened. Now you tell. Constitutional morality question had come last year. Mains question was there, outright constitutional morality. The thing is, they are asking it in 30 words, 2 marks. So you have to be very clear, 1 line, 2 line, clear that this is constitutional morality, and also example with it. So this was it. I've discussed all these papers, and this, whatever I've discussed till now, is 460 marks. But that does not limit it to what current affairs is done with this. As I told, 200 more marks, you can add more examples, data. See, that is where the reach of current affairs is much more what we are thinking today. In pre also, it is increasing continuously. Context is very important to understand. Questions are not being asked out of context from nowhere, but they have certain, it is being covered. At least they were somewhere. You might also have to see some unconventional sources, like quickly scan through some important pages in Twitter, which have been, government has also quoted somewhere, or newer trends like, trend section in Twitter. Sometimes you might find something like cheetah with respect to, you might find some older information where there was one very good 5-6 tweets about the history of Asian cheetah in India. Like when it, how much population was there, where it was centered, how it was killed, what, when was the last cheetah killed, now the reintroduction, like that. There was very nice thread. So you might find some additional. I still remember this Twitter-based question had come in 2020 prelims on elephants. Similarly, 4 or 5 traits of elephants were given, and straightforward, this question was put in pre. Which of the following statements were it? So you never know which way. We have to be smart. We have to become a little more unconventional, but let our base be newspaper. Let us, so that is where this current affairs program of mine also comes in. I invite you all tomorrow, again for open session 1:30 p.m., where I'll give you this week's current affairs session. We'll have a discussion and how we approach overall current affairs, and you can have a look. You can attend the class. But for me, it is very important picking up the important, there might be some very good articles, some other newspaper, but it is not part of our read. But that is where, I try to go in, try to fetch more and tell you that this is where more dimensions you should try to connect. This topic is not limited to it. Everything has more dimensions to it. Current affairs today has become a very, very important, in fact, the backbone. It's like a thread. If everything is in isolation, if every subject is a bead, it is a thread connecting a bead together. So current affairs mastery on it, grip on it, is a prerequisite to clearing this exam today. Without it, if you feel, I have many students coming, newspaper agar na kare to ho jayega. If you do not do the newspaper, can it work without it? I said, no, it cannot. It is a must, because it will make your opinion, your personal opinion, your own identity, you will express there. And that is what UPSC, just imagine an examiner checking same type of state, arguments over and over again. 4, 4, 4. I'll give, okay, this is unique. This is something different. I'll give you 1.5, 2 mark more. So you need to have your own opinion. You need to be a little more diverse. It can be challenging to read, but over the time, you'll love reading it. Now let's have questions. If there's any, please, you can ask. Yeah. No, so that is where I'll tell you. Are you on this Mitra's IAS mentoring group? No, okay. So every day, usually articles to be read from a newspaper is posted along with keywords to focus. So if we go by it, 40 minutes is the usual time, 8 to 10 articles take to read. And keywords, if we identify 5 important ones for a day, if you spend 30 minutes on that, that's enough. I expect you to 1 to 1.5 hours a day. Now, these are things to keep in mind. Keep in mind as your be conscious about that. If you are just conscious about it, ultimately you will know in which direction I should go. Should I search there? Should I be, I tell you, for a topic, 10 minutes are enough to do a research from 3-4 articles. You don't have to write a thesis on it. What I'm telling you is that certain topics you'll find some good content from certain relevant areas. But it's up to you over the time. If you identify this, exercise it. Like the way I've told you that these are the trick. 1.5 hours is the maximum time you'll need for newspaper plus the keywords. You don't go through all the keywords of the day, because every day I mention the keywords and they will be repeated over and over. But 5 are the keywords which are unique every day. Those are very important. And if you can go through, I assure you, I've worked with that 80% of the questions related to current affairs will be covered in those keywords, if you can do it. And 5 to 10 minutes per keyword, 5 minutes maximum to, so it would take 40 plus another, let's say maximum 40. It is 1 or 20 minutes. This is what I recommend. Newspaper, to be very honest, how you should approach, identify the important articles to read first. That is number 1 priority. But 10 to 15 minutes, just scan through other articles also. Because sometimes, it might not be important, but an example can be quoted somewhere from that. And moreover, and from this perspective of interview, eventually, they can go into some political issues, your opinion on political issues. If you just keep skipping that over the period, you might not have any knowledge about it, and that will be taken very negatively in interview. That okay, you are going to be part, but still you are at the same time, it can be taken positively because you have to be political neutral, but it can also be that you're unaware of the political situation. So 1 hour 30 minutes is the time you should invest on newspaper, including the keywords. What I'm telling you, you don't have to maintain as such notes. What I'm doing is, if I get a chance, I'll just show you how do I cover this. Just a moment. Just a second. I'll just show it to you. So like we had this previous class of current affairs. So this is how we club it, bring it together. So I'm just opening it. So what was in last week, last to last week, UNESCO State of Education report. This was in news about takeaways. So 10 to 15 topics a week is which SEO Summit highlights, discussing about that. So sometimes what we see is, okay, we are seeing it, which happened, but nowhere we have, gone deeper into it. That is where current affairs goes, which I'm covering. Like the CRPF mandate of security forces, CRPF DG told that Naxalism is going to. So we went into CRPF of what it really, the function of CRPF is. The mandate of security forces is an important part of your so similarly, there are so many topics which we cover that way. So I would recommend you to come tomorrow and just have a look at that as well. But I feel the 1.5 hour, with my own experience to tell you, it should not take more than that, including keywords. Yeah. Anyone else? So it's not regularly. Sometimes if you see, then there are certain reports which are nationally or it's a very, India takes it seriously. Like for example, UNDP reports, HDI report, like gender parity index and this, that. Then these are reports with respect to society, various parameters. Education, there are certain reports of ASER. Niti Aayog, there are certain reports which it comes out SDG index like this and that. Right? Education after health, there will be few reports. So every area, 1 or 2 reports max. Pick up highlight of it, 5 to 10 points per each report. And make sure, why I have not tried to maintain that from January or December onwards. Because by the time you write, all will be the latest reports. Because, or you can start October also, because September is the next mains. All reports which will be in front of you, there'll be no update the next year while you write. So if you divide every topic 1 page and make 20-30 pages, I just want you to maximum 1 to 2 report per topic, because you cannot quote 2-3 reports in one answer. It will sometimes can also get into conflict. If you're supporting an argument, give the data for it. See this, as per this report, ASER report 2022, this is the state of learning outcomes, like that. Or as per the SDG index, states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu are proceeding fast, or total fertility rate has fallen down, and whereas for states like Bihar and this is still above total fertility, like that. You can quote this. So this can go very, it will be very easy to remember. 20-30 pages won't be tough to remember at the end. But having a separate document just for data can be very nice too. And that too, you don't do it together. When the day you give GS2 and GS1, you read society, polity and related data. You give GS3, read economy and environment related data then. So it's not necessary. It's very easily can be done like that, right? So economy, I would recommend that you start from economic survey onwards. Economic survey, budget, and then eventually 6 months data with respect to inflation, unemployment, poverty, like that. All these, which is the inclusive developments, all the areas data. But start from, not now, start from economic survey onwards. Economic survey will bring in some important, but then that too will be revised. So you can say, as per economic survey, this, then it can be justified. Or as per World Bank, this report, India will achieve this is much growth, like that. So GDP you can keep separate, right? Then fiscal deficit you can keep separate, like separate, you can divide it into subparts in economy. This will be very helpful, as I'm telling you again and again, for your justifying your answer, because at the end, if the material remains same, and if you just add data, 1 mark per question, if you do it for, let's say, in Gs2, 3, and even a little part of 1, let's say for 30 questions, 30 additional mark, with just a simple exercise, 30 marks is a big difference to getting you a good rank, to keeping it in the last list. 50 marks will take you out of the list. Okay. So, and when I've worked with students on these areas, I tell they have significantly improved because of this. So data bank, that should be your data bank. You have written it down. Don't copy paste it from somewhere. When you come across newspaper, some important report highlight, it will not be every day. It might be 2-3 instances in a month, 3-4 instances in a month, because if you see, economic data usually comes like CPI, WPI, trade deficit, CAD, like that. You just try to maintain month, just small mention out, enter it, so that you can also analyze the trend. UPSC, how it asks. So analyze the overall trend over this last 6 months. You can just draw a graph, then show it. Very interesting. It will just look that you have a very, you've been following it very closely, like that. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, you can. Uh, you see, Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, you can surely use because they are the government executive. No, so not on sensitive topics. Sensitive topics, when I mean that maybe they would have said in a lighter tone, not as official stance of EAM briefing. It has to be more of EAM briefing highlight, like India stands as a like open, fair, and like this Indo-Pacific, like that, rather than a very casual statement he's made somewhere. That should not be it on official record, be it as a uh, external affairs briefing, yeah, minister MEA briefing. That is more important. Hmm. Hmm. So this is where it becomes a little tough to attempt such questions. So middle path here has to be so outright criticism and outright appeasement should not be approached in such questions. You tell facts, but take, yes, there have been instances in past where it has been, but if India has stayed 75 years in this, that shows the inner strength, or the strength of the people to work in this direction, to be it is an intrinsic part of the culture of the country, like that. But yes, there have been threats, but those, you can say that maybe in the fringe elements, like that also. But see, you might have your own opinion, but you might also have to calibrate yourself while writing. I'm not saying that, but expressing sometime on sensitive topics, expressing it, I have seen people losing marks a lot, even eventually leading to negative marks when it is naming some, if you see the guidelines, sometimes naming, sometimes becoming too personal can also lead to getting negative marks in mains. There is a thing called negative marking also in mains. So I feel calibrated. Sometimes, many a times I have written answer when I don't agree, but I know that I have better arguments and can be much calibrated position with respect to as a eventual. See, UPSC will check, or will check, because you are going to be future civil servants. As a future civil servants, you just have to take the orders of the executive of the day. As the your CCS as well as AIS conduct rules, you are clearly told that you cannot have a political opinion. If you do, so any action will be taken against you. So what I personally feel is that taking a calibrated position is much better in your answer writing in critical questions. But where, like in international relations, when you criticize something which is in India's favor, then you can outrightly criticize it also, that okay, this is India cannot participate in this because this is against India's interests, like that. It does not mean everywhere you have to take middle path, but you have to talk about overall interest. So like for example, I'll just tell you. So there were, I made some interview questions for certain students with respect to hijab ban in Karnataka. When you, as a model answer, uh, again, a middle path has to be, but then there are many people who have, and likewise, maybe at my own level, I would have a different opinion. But you cannot express it on the piece of paper as a outright criticism. Yes, you can, like that doctrine of essentiality, we are limiting it to religion, but why not to culture? It is a code derived doctrine. It is not, and it is developed over the years, but it does not mean it is not infallible. So you can, with due respect to the judiciary, you can go in a subtle level of criticism, like that. But judiciary related questions which are still under sub judice will never be asked. Remember that. So nowadays, in fact, people will become more, the questions will expect, I feel more questions will come up on judiciary in upcoming years. Why? If you see the coverage already in last 2-3 days has started increasing on every single statements which judges are saying. Why? Because now online telecast have started. Media's houses on full day are keeping a track of what judges are saying and writing it down and penning down an article of this is what the judgment has. Like today, Justice Chandrachud, a front page article, very important though, very important, about abortion rights of a single women. Very important. Then what I see in last 3-4 years, ever since the telecast has started, you have around 10-12 judgments being critically analyzed, what judges are saying. So I think so that you may also have to look into what the judges are saying. Nice, right. So any other question? Yeah. Yeah. Party related question will never be asked. One thing, yeah. Government stance always. Yeah. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it is a very common thing where, like here only, court said, Supreme Court, to review the decision of allowing disabled people in IPS, right, or other forces, and government has taken a negative stance on it. So you have to take, you can take either approach. What you feel that my arguments are stronger, right? Court is also, judiciary is also part of one of the organ of the state, right? So here it won't be I should favor judges or I should favor government. So what you feel that you can give a concrete argument on, and you should go by it, like that. Usually I feel that 80% of cases, 80% of cases, court's decisions should be have a good arguments, because court will give written explanations with that. There will be data with that. Preferably go with it, because the people who will check will not be UPSC or government people. They'll be professors hired, and they'll be much more happy with the reasoning rather than appeasement. Okay, like that, right? Yeah. Anyone else? So this is where we conclude the session today. I invite those who've come new today to come tomorrow and attend the session at 1:30 p.m. Must, and it will be current affairs session for the past preceding week, how we cover the events and how we integrate that in our overall approach. And if there's any query you want to talk after the session, you can come and we can have a discussion with respect to anything which you want to discuss. So that's it for today. Thank you so much. And we'll come up with another seminar soon, and shall catch you tomorrow for the session, current affairs session. Thank you.